Welcome back to the Wounded Warrior Experience, produced by the American Veterans Center and presented by Military Order of the Purple Heart Service Foundation and the University of Phoenix. In this segment, we will be discussing the unseen wounds of post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injuries, as well as touching on the increasingly important issue of suicide prevention. Let me start with our panel. Chief Master Sergeant Richard Simonson, Senior Enlisted Leader at Joint Base Anacostia Bolling. You are working on issues of PTSD, TBI, and suicide prevention. Kim Ruocco, Director, Suicide Postvention Program, Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, TAPS. And Justin O'Donnell, BU3. Justin was with the U.S. Navy, deployed to Iraq in 2008, 2009, and he'll be speaking about chronic PTSD. If I could start with Chief Master Sergeant Richard Simonson. Tell me what you were doing. You were a public affairs officer working with journalists like myself out in Afghanistan. You were on, you had been outside the wire 66 times. You had been involved in 5 situations where there was contact made with the enemy, 2 air medical evacuations. All of this started to accumulate for you. Walk us through how this affected you.
Well, thank you very much for having us here today. And I was asked to be the public affairs officer for a provincial reconstruction team, but our mission was to work with the legitimate government in Afghanistan so they can produce sustainable services for the people that they serve, what we would all want in our local town councils and stuff. And so we're trying to give them the tools to do that. And we had 106 dedicated sailors, soldiers, and airmen who were there to do that mission in that province. And we would go out all the time and on the convoy. The third time, my armored vehicle was actually hit by an IED. And we returned fire and suppressed the enemy. And I got out and the adrenaline's running, and I don't really understand how hurt I am at first. And then the adrenaline runs off, and then I realized just how bad it is. And Petty Officer Steve David, our corpsman, said, "Get back in the truck." And then they treated me. The fourth time that we were hit, we were in a crowded marketplace in Subdistrict 6 when an IED just blew up right behind our vehicle. And everywhere you go in Afghanistan, you would see posters of, hey, if you're experiencing these types of symptoms, go get help. And I was experiencing all of them.
What were those symptoms?
The headaches, the ringing in the ears, feeling confused, just not being right. But I had some nausea and everything. And a few hours after that incident, I told my wingman, I got to go to the aid station. And they evaluated me, and then I was medevaced again to the Kandahar hospital.
So these were signs for a traumatic brain injury?
Yes.
And it was the force of the blast that
Just a continuous, there was nothing that ever penetrated, hit me in the head, but it's just blast after blast after blast, concussion after concussion after concussion. It just builds on itself.
Yeah. They used to call it battle rattle. And it's literally the brain shaking.
And there's not much brain up there to begin with. So.
All the more to move around.
That's right.
Tell me about your companion here.
My service dog, Yoko, is from I got her from an organization called Paws for Purple Hearts. And just like Amos.
Yeah.
Darn traumatic brain injury. Just like Amos, she was trained for PTSD sufferers. Yeah. But when they're little, they don't know who they're going to get placed with. So she knows 90 different types of commands. She also can turn on and off lights, open up the refrigerator, pick a quarter up off a linoleum floor and give it to a clerk. I mean, amazing stuff that she can do.
How do dogs help with PTSD?
Well, most of the time, they're an unobtrusive companion. And just having a dog around, if you like dogs, you know what I'm talking about. And if you don't like dogs, maybe you should. But she's always between me and the person I'm interacting with, so she gives me a little more personal space I need. And you know, I ride on the metro in the DC area, so you know how crowded all that can get. And so it would just be too many people on the bus, and I'd let 2-3 buses go by just because there were just too many people on them. And I'd call my wife all crying, saying, "Come get me, I'm at the train station." And she was a very wonderful caregiver and always took care of me when I needed that. But she suggested first that maybe if I had a service dog, that maybe I'd get a little better a little more quickly.
And I see it says Paws for Purple Hearts.
Yes, she was actually trained at the old Walter Reed Hospital by folks with PTSD, and of course it helps them with their treatment as well.
Amazing. Thank you. Kim, tell me about why you're here, and you have a personal story of loss, and how is TAPS helping? But tell me first about what happened to you.
Well, I'm really honored to be here with these heroes because my husband had invisible wounds of war and never got help. And if he would have gotten help, he could have been among these great men here who are making a difference and using their wounds and their injuries to make a difference and to help others. And unfortunately, you know, he suffered from unresolved trauma and loss, first from accidents at his training. He was a Marine helicopter pilot, a Cobra pilot. He was very good at what he did. And in his early days, his first squadron that he was stationed with, there was many mishaps where he lost lots of friends. And those guys never really talked about how that affected them. He suffered severe post-traumatic stress after those incidents. He suffered very deep depression. Because of the stigma around help seeking, he never told anybody. I, as a spouse, kept it quiet too because I was so afraid.
What did you notice as a spouse?
Yeah, well, his were obvious. I mean, he was having trouble even getting out of bed. He was having nightmares. He was having anxiety attacks. He was getting like numbness in his hands and his feet. He was having difficulty eating. He had lost his appetite. And that was his first real bout of depression. And that was about 10 years before he died. And so as a military spouse, I was really afraid to tell anybody what we were seeing at home for fear that that would interfere with his career or make things worse for him. And then 10 years later, he was deployed to Iraq. He flew 75 combat missions. He had a really good tour there, but he experienced a lot. He came back from that tour and was very different.
What did you notice?
I noticed, you know, at first he seemed okay. He came back and he was tanned and strong, and you know, but he had a look in his eyes that now I notice in others who are really suffering, kind of a blank stare and kind of an emptiness. And I knew he was distant from us. The night that he died, we talked about getting help, and he said to me, "I'm going to get help, but it's going to mean the end of everything for us. They're no longer going to see me as a leader. They're going to think I don't want to redeploy. They're going to see me as a failure." He saw it as a failure in himself, when really he was sick and injured. And you know, I even asked him on the phone that evening, "Are you feeling so badly that you think you could hurt yourself?" And he said to me, "No, I would never do that to you and the boys." But then when he got off the phone, I think, you know, he really sat there and thought about, in his mind, that getting help would change the way people viewed him.
And this was 2004,
This
so
was
it was when
2004.
there was still a huge stigma. Now the leadership at the Pentagon and elsewhere,
Yes.
everybody's talking about this, but nobody was talking about this in 2004.
That's right, and he was a pilot too, so he was so afraid of, you know, losing his wings or losing his flight status. And you know, and what's sad is that he was a very outgoing guy. He had tons of charisma, and he would have been the kind of guy who could have got through that depression and got treatment for post-traumatic stress and could have been out here talking to this group and saving lives. But instead, he thought he was losing everything when he really wasn't.
And what are you doing now through TAPS to
Yeah.
help families
Well,
who've lost
I
through suicide?
I went to TAPS, the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, for help for myself and for my 2 boys. I was looking to reconnect with the military and also to get some grief support, and found that suicide loss is very different, that we have different issues and different things that we have to deal with. And so thank God, Bonnie Carroll, my good friend and my mentor, was there, and she said, you know what, let's build a whole program around suicide loss. And we have. And fortunately and unfortunately, we have about 3,000 survivors of military suicide that are now have come to us for support.
And there's almost one suicide a day in the Army. Is that possible? Those statistics are stunning. One suicide a day in the U.S. Army.
Yes.
Justin, you joined the military, the Navy, when Hurricane Katrina happened. That's when you headed off to boot camp. So that was the beginning of this journey. You deployed 3 times. On your 3rd deployment, you were in Iraq in 2007. You deployed for the 3rd time 2 days after your infant daughter was born. That must have been hard. And things got tough for you. When you returned in 2010, you said it was the first time you'd seen your daughter since she was born. How did you know you were suffering from PTSD?
I noticed a while ago that I started not liking what I was, the things I used to like. I didn't want to, I'm a very social person. I used to like to go out and go to parties and go hang out with friends at the beach, and I kind of turned into a recluse almost. Just, I had my internet, I had my cable TV with all the movie channels and my video games, and I was fine by myself, and, turned out that wasn't the case. I started drinking a lot and ended up in rehab for a month, and that was pretty hard. I was having difficulties with my relationship at the time. I was married, and that that went downhill fast. So I kind of excuse me.
How did you decide to get help, and what did you do?
I was having issues at work. I'd get these, just fits of rage. Anybody and everybody around me were just the enemy, everybody. And it could have just been a guy standing in the corner, what the hell are you looking at? And get out of my face. And I guess the E7s don't really like when you when you tell them that, hey, how you really feel. And, well, I did that. I ended up telling my OIC, officer in charge, how I really felt, and then I don't even remember the conversation. It was all a blur. At that time, I'd already made an appointment. I wasn't sure if I was going to keep it to seek mental health treatment at Walter Reed. And I have to say, the Walter Reed Mental Health Department has helped me a lot. And, through, the course of medications, therapy, just treatment, I've gotten better. But
and this is only a couple months ago that you did this, right?
Yeah.
And you're sitting here before this audience, sharing your story. That takes a lot of courage.
I'm kind of pretending nobody's here right now.
Well, it's not easy. And what would you say to somebody out there who might be feeling some of these symptoms or noticing that they're short-tempered and that these accumulated deployments, they add up? It's been 11 years of war.
Get help. I've had to constantly tell myself, I didn't fail. That this is an illness. You need to be treated for it. If you have any of those symptoms, please get help.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you. Yeah. Because you know what? You're doing it, and our hats are off to you.
That's right.
Thank you all. Thank you all for sharing your stories today.
Thank you.
In our next segment, we focus on the life of wounded warriors after they have returned home and re-entered the workforce, when the Wounded Warrior Experience, presented by the University of Phoenix and Military Order of the Purple Heart Service Foundation, continues.
America's wounded warriors have made great sacrifices to secure the freedom of our nation and our citizens. Saab North America is proud to honor their service. Since our founding in 1936, GEICO has proudly served those who serve. We are proud and honored to support this year's Wounded Warrior Experience.